Mom, I'm always sleepy, I'm scared, whispered my 9-year-old son, his face a ghostly shade of gray. I found this bottle in my sister's closet, no label, just a sharp, chemical stench. My own family was slowly turning a healthy boy into an invalid just to seize our house and inheritance. You won't believe the price they put on my son's life. But I made sure they paid in full. My name is Clara Bennett. I'm 41, a single mother, and I had just touched down in Denver after a grueling 4-day stint in Chicago. I hauled my luggage through the front door of our suburban home on Friday evening, the air still crisp with the mountain chill. The moment the door latched, my 9-year-old son, Daniel, was there. His face was a ghostly shade of gray. He gripped my forearm, his voice a frantic, thin whisper. Mom, please, can I stop taking the pills Aunt Laura makes me swallow? They make me sick, and I can't stay awake. I sleep all day. Before I could even process his words, Laura stepped out from the kitchen. She had her arms crossed, wearing that practiced, brittle smile she used when she wanted to play the martyr. He's just being dramatic, Clara. They're special supplements, custom-made for his constitution. High-quality stuff. My mother reached over to stroke Daniel's hair, her expression one of forced, maternal calm. Listen to your aunt, honey. She only wants what's best for you. My father didn't even look up from the television, merely nodding from his armchair. He's lucky he has family here to step in. You're gone half the month as it is. A heavy, suffocating silence passed between the three of them, a quick, knowing glance I'd been catching more and more lately. Daniel's grip on my hand was so tight it bruised. That night, once the house had settled into a hollow quiet, I crept into Laura's room. I found it on the top shelf of the closet, hidden behind a stack of heavy winter sweaters. It was a small, white plastic bottle with no commercial label. Just a strip of masking tape with her handwriting, vitamins. I twisted the cap. The scent that hit me wasn't herbal or earthy. It was a sharp, synthetic medicinal stench that made my stomach turn. It was the unmistakable, heavy aroma of concentrated sedatives. My blood turned to ice. The weight of that bottle stayed with me all night. I sat on the floor of Daniel's room, my back against the door, holding him while he drifted into a deep, unnatural slumber. Every time his breathing shifted, I checked his pulse. By 5:30 in the morning, I couldn't endure the silence anymore. I woke him gently, told him we were going for an early breakfast, and carried his limp, heavy body to the car. 20 minutes later, we pulled into the emergency intake at the University Medical Center. Dr. Grace Miller took one look at Daniel, the pale eyelids, the slurred, sluggish speech, and ordered immediate, priority blood work. She didn't waste time on small talk. They moved him to a pediatric observation bay, and I was left to pace the sterile linoleum floors, the unlabeled bottle heavy in my coat pocket like a smoking gun. 3 hours felt like a lifetime. Eventually, Dr. Miller called me into her office. She closed the door and slid a lab printout across the mahogany desk. The numbers were staggering. His diphenhydramine levels are at 2,450 nanograms, she said, her voice hard and level. That is 7 times the therapeutic limit for a grown man, Clara. In a 9-year-old, repeated doses of this magnitude can cause permanent neurological damage. We're looking at potential issues with memory, cognitive processing, and attention span. She paused, her eyes locking onto mine with professional ferocity. Someone has been intentionally sedating your son with high-potency adult medication. My knees gave out, and I hit the chair hard. Dr. Miller didn't wait for my permission. She picked up the phone and called Child Protective Services, then the hospital's security detail. Within 10 minutes, a social worker and a county deputy were in the room. I handed over the bottle without a word. The deputy photographed the evidence while the social worker explained that Daniel would be admitted for full toxicology monitoring. They needed to establish a precise timeline of exposure. I managed to photograph the official reports on my phone before the authorities took the originals for the case file. Dr. Miller handed me a duplicate summary, her voice dropping to a low, cautious whisper. "Take this. Go home. You're going to need this paper trail." The drive back to the suburbs was a blur of adrenaline and cold dread. I walked into the house just after 3 in the afternoon. Laura was lounging on the sofa, mindlessly scrolling through her phone. Mom was folding laundry at the dining table, and Dad was focused on a golf broadcast. I dropped my keys on the granite counter with a sharp crack and walked straight to the coffee table, laying the lab report face up in front of them. Laura sat up slowly. Mom froze. Dad finally muted the TV. Laura reached for the paper first. As her eyes scanned the toxicology results, the color drained from her cheeks. My father snatched it from her, squinting at the text as if it were written in a foreign tongue. "A lab error," he muttered. "These things happen all the time. They mix up samples in those big hospitals." My mother moved behind Laura, placing her hands protectively on her shoulders. "Honey, she was only trying to help the boy get some proper rest. Doctors always blow these things out of proportion to justify their fees." Laura's voice trembled, high and thin. "It's just a stronger vitamin. Clara is just overreacting, like she always does." I kept my voice flat, devoid of the rage screaming inside me. Child Protective Services is already involved. The police have the bottle. This isn't something you can talk your way out of. The room went dead silent. Then my father leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, his face darkening with a sudden, sharp aggression. "You're really willing to destroy this family over a simple misunderstanding?" My mother's grip on Laura tightened. "Think about Daniel, Clara. All this legal stress isn't healthy for him." Laura wiped her eyes, but I saw the shift in her gaze, the cold, frantic calculation. My father glanced at my mother and gave a microscopic shake of his head. "The message was received, say nothing more." I turned and walked upstairs without another word. Behind me, I heard my father's hushed, jagged whisper. "Let it blow over. She'll calm down once she realizes she can't manage without us." I locked my bedroom door and immediately began uploading every photo of those documents to the cloud. The war had started, and I was the only one who knew I had already won. Sunday morning arrived with a heavy, deceptive normalcy. My parents and Laura left for their weekly run to the warehouse club, Dad behind the wheel, Mom in the passenger seat, and Laura in the back, clutching her stack of reusable bags. I waited until their SUV disappeared around the corner of 142nd Street, then I moved with a frantic, silent precision. I had paid a premium for same-day pickup at an electronics store in the foothills. For small, matte white indoor cameras, discreet, no larger than hockey pucks, designed to vanish against a ceiling. I hauled the ladder from the garage, working in a fever of quiet focus. The first unit went into the basement ceiling, positioned directly above the old leather sofa to capture the entire recreation area. The second I tucked into a corner joist near the mini-fridge, angled to catch the stairs and the doorway. The third went high into the living room's crown molding, aimed at the front entrance. The fourth was placed in the upstairs hall, perfectly situated to monitor every bedroom door. 10 minutes for each. No wires, no blinking status lights. I paired them to a fresh, encrypted account with a password known only to me, then enabled motion alerts and continuous cloud recording. By the time I heard the garage door rumble open, the house was a digital trap, live and invisible. Monday morning, I dropped Daniel off at Pine Ridge Elementary. I kissed the top of his head, lingering for a second too long, before driving toward my office in the city, pretending as though my world wasn't held together by Scotch tape and spite. At 9:03 a.m., my phone vibrated in my pocket. A motion alert at the front door. I pulled up the feed. Laura, dressed in pajama shorts and one of my old university hoodies, was opening the door for a man I had never seen. He was dark-haired, wearing a navy pea coat, and carrying 2 cups from a cafe on Ridge Road. She took the coffee, kissed him with a desperate, practiced intensity right there on the porch, and pulled him inside. They vanished down the basement stairs. I switched the feed to the basement camera. The resolution was a crisp, haunting 1080p. Laura set the coffees on a trunk, pushed him gently back onto the sofa, and climbed onto his lap. They moved together with the ease of people who had been doing this for weeks. He laughed softly when she whispered into his ear. She pulled his coat off, let it heap onto the floor, and reached for a remote to turn on the string lights she'd hung the month before. The glow made the scene look staged, intimate and sickeningly domestic. She glanced up once, directly toward the lens she didn't know existed, and smirked before burying her face in his neck. The pattern repeated. Tuesday, he arrived at 10:41 a.m. Same coffee, same route to the basement. This time, she had a playlist running, indie folk music she knew I detested. They danced slowly in the center of the rug, barefoot, wine glasses already in hand. Wednesday, he brought takeout from a Thai place on Broadway. They ate cross-legged on the floor, feeding each other between kisses, laughing at jokes I couldn't yet hear. Thursday, he arrived at 9:29 a.m. carrying a small black duffel bag. Laura locked the front door behind him, and led him downstairs. The bag remained there all day. Every morning, I sat at my desk, staring at marketing decks and responding to messages with one hand while the second monitor showed my own home being used like a cheap hotel. I saved every clip into an encrypted folder, time-stamped and titled. My pulse was a constant, dull throb. I drank coffee I couldn't taste. By Thursday night, I had over 30 hours of footage. I still lacked clear audio of their ultimate goal, but the invasion was undeniable. My house ceased to be mine the moment my car cleared the driveway. Friday morning, I didn't go into the office. I drove back toward the neighborhood through sheets of gray rain and parked 3 blocks away, sheltered under a stand of dripping pines. I cracked the window for air and opened my laptop on the steering wheel. The rain hammered the roof, a rhythmic drumming that tried to drown out the dread. At 8:17 a.m., the man, Mark, walked in with the usual coffees and a small paper bag. Laura met him at the door wearing nothing but one of my oversized flannel shirts. She pulled him straight to the basement. I switched to the wide-angle feed and turned the volume to maximum. She flicked on the string lights and pushed him onto the couch. "Your sister is definitely gone until 6 at the earliest," she said, her voice coming through the speakers with chilling clarity as she climbed onto his lap. "We have the whole day." She kissed him slowly, then pulled back just enough for the camera to catch every word. "Everything is on track, babe. Daniel failed another spelling test last week. His teacher already emailed me about potential processing issues. Another month of this dosage, and no pediatrician will question a developmental delay diagnosis." Mark traced a silver chain around her neck, one I had never seen before. "And then?" he asked. "Then Mom and Dad file for guardianship of a cognitively impaired minor. The law is very clear: if the parent is deemed unfit due to chronic absenteeism, and the child has documented special needs, the court almost always awards guardianship to willing family members. Once they control Daniel, they control the trust." She smiled as if she were discussing a summer vacation. "Half the equity in this house came from his father's life insurance. That money was earmarked for his future care. As his guardians, they get to decide what care means. We liquidate the asset, pay off Dad's $70,000 hole from that failed land deal in the valley, give Mom and Dad a cushion, and the rest is ours. Clara keeps her job and her suitcase. Everyone wins. We liquidate the house, clear Dad's $70,000 hole from that failed development deal in Wyoming, give Mom and Dad a comfortable cushion, and the rest belongs to us. Clara keeps her career and her suitcase. It's a perfect trade." Mark raised an eyebrow, a slow smirk spreading across his face. "Your parents are really that desperate?" "Mom has always favored me anyway. They've been dropping hints for months about how unfair it is that I'm struggling while Clara got the house in the settlement. She reached for her phone. My banking app was still logged in on her device because I'd trusted her with a secondary card for the household groceries. She turned the screen toward him. $4,200 at the jeweler's. A vintage-style luxury timepiece. Happy birthday, baby. He kissed her with a force that made the old sofa groan. You're brilliant. I love it. Laura laughed against his mouth, a sound that made my skin crawl. Just wait until the escrow on this place closes. I sat in the dark car, rain streaking the windshield in jagged lines, replaying the clip 3 times to ensure I hadn't succumbed to some fever dream. Every word was sharp, crystalline, and damning. I recorded the entire exchange to my own device, and then dug into my transaction history. The charge had posted on Wednesday afternoon. A notification had been sent to an old email account I'd stopped checking after the divorce, the one still linked to that specific card, because I'd never bothered to update the secondary user settings. Later that night, long after Daniel was asleep, the hallway camera caught my parents in the kitchen. They thought the house was theirs. My father poured 2 fingers of bourbon, his voice a low, gravelly rumble. As soon as the neuropsychological assessment is finalized, we file the petition. I've already consulted an attorney in the city. Clara travels too much, works too much. It's a textbook case of neglect. Any judge will side with the family. My mother nodded, slowly twisting her wedding ring around her finger. Laura deserves this house more anyway. She's the one who's been here, day in and day out. My father clinked his glass against hers. To new beginnings. I saved that clip too, labeling it with a cold, clinical timestamp. My hands were ice steady for the first time all week. Saturday morning, I walked into the kitchen while they were eating breakfast. I placed my phone on the marble island, screen up, volume at its limit, and hit play on the basement recording. Laura's voice filled the room, cold and calculating. Once they control Daniel, they control the trust. Clara keeps her job and her suitcase. Spoons froze mid-air. The color drained from every face at the table. I didn't say a word. I simply let the recording run. The final confrontation happened at 3 o'clock that afternoon. The house smelled of garlic and slow-simmered herbs. My mother stood at the stove, stirring a pot of sauce, while my father was at the island, cubing bread for dinner. From the basement, I could hear the low thrum of music and Laura's unmistakable, airy laugh. I dropped my bag on the bench, kicked off my shoes, and pulled my phone from my pocket. With one tap, the Thursday afternoon clip began to broadcast through the integrated house speakers I'd synced to the same network as the cameras. Laura's voice boomed through the rafters, echoing off the vaulted ceilings. A court-approved sale for care purposes. Dad pays off his debt, Mom gets her travel fund, and we walk away with the rest. The wooden spoon clattered into the pot. My mother spun around, sauce splattering the white tile backsplash. My father's knife froze mid-stroke. Heavy footsteps pounded up the stairs. Laura burst into the kitchen first, Mark trailing a half step behind her, his shirt untucked and his face flushed. She saw the phone in my hand, and her expression turned to stone. My father recovered first, his voice booming. Turn that off. Now. My mother's hand flew to her mouth, her voice trembling. Clara, you recorded your own family. I didn't move. The clip moved on to my father's midnight bourbon toast, his voice echoing with the promise of taking my son away. Every syllable hung in the air like a physical weight. Laura lunged for the phone, but I lifted it high above my head. Touch me, and this goes straight to the county sheriff. Mark shifted toward the back door, his eyes darting toward the exit. Laura grabbed his wrist. You're not leaving me here to face this. My father's face turned a deep, bruised purple. You have no right to spy on us in our own home. This is my house, I said, my voice dropping to a deadly, quiet level. My name is on the deed. My son is the one you've been poisoning. My life is the one you plan to sell. My mother began to sob, great dramatic gasps of air. We were only trying to secure everyone's future, Clara. You're never here. Laura shrieked, her voice cracking. I've been the one raising him while you're off chasing promotions in Chicago. My father slammed the bread knife down onto the counter. You call the police and you destroy 4 lives. Think about Daniel. Do you really want him taken away by strangers in the system? I met his stare, unblinking. I am thinking about Daniel. That's why this ends right now. Mark tried again, his voice lower, more desperate. Laura, I really think we should. She whipped around on him. We're in this together. You promised. He looked at me, then at the floor, and took a slow, deliberate step back. Laura's grip tightened until her knuckles were white. You coward, she hissed. My mother moved between us, her arms spread like a shield. Clara, baby, we're blood. Let's just talk this out. Nobody has to get hurt. I let out a short, sharp laugh that held no humor. Blood doesn't drug a 9-year-old for a profit margin. My father took a threatening step forward, his shadow looming over the counter. You report this, and we'll fight you in court for years. We'll say you fabricated the whole thing. Who do you think a judge will believe? Grandparents who've been here every day, or a mother who's gone half the month? We'll bury you in litigation. Who do you think the judge will believe? Laura's eyes narrowed to slits, her voice dripping with sudden, sharp venom. The grandparents who have been here every single day, or the mother who's gone half the month. When they dig into your travel logs, your overtime, and every time you canceled on a nanny, good luck keeping custody. My mother nodded through her tears, her face a mask of tragic concern. We only want what's best for the boy, Clara. I looked at the 3 people who had raised me, the people who had shared every holiday, every birthday, and every funeral, and I felt the final thread of my old life snap. You want what's best for yourselves, I said. And you just confessed to it on camera. My father's fists clenched at his sides. You'll regret this. My mother collapsed into a kitchen chair, wailing into her hands. My own daughter. This house should have been mine anyway. Laura screamed. Mark finally saw his opening. He broke free from the tension and bolted for the back door, the screen slamming behind him with a sharp, hollow crack. I raised my phone, ended the recording, and dialed 911 right in front of them. 911, what is your emergency? I kept my eyes locked on my family. I need officers and child protective services at 842 Bluebell Court, Golden. My son has been poisoned by relatives attempting to steal his inheritance. I have video and audio evidence. Laura lunged at me, but my father caught her arm. My mother's sobbing reached a fever pitch. Units are en route, ma'am, the dispatcher said. Stay on the line. I only hung up when I heard the sirens 2 blocks away, cutting through the mountain drizzle. The first patrol car rolled up exactly 11 minutes later, its blue and red lights reflecting off the wet pavement. A second unit followed, then an unmarked sedan belonging to the state's social services. 2 officers stepped onto the porch while the social worker stayed back, already taking notes. I met them at the door, a USB drive gripped in my hand, and my phone still recording. I led the lead officer, Sergeant Ramirez, straight into the living room. My father stood rigid by the sofa. My mother clutched a handful of shredded tissues. Laura paced like a caged animal, her mascara streaking her pale face. I handed over the drive. 27 video files, 11 audio clips, all time-stamped. Child endangerment, conspiracy to commit guardianship fraud, and attempted theft of a minor's trust. Everything you need is right here. Ramirez plugged the drive into a tablet. The Thursday clip started playing on the large screen I'd synced earlier. Laura's voice filled the room, cold and clear, Court-approved sale for care purposes. My father lunged for the remote, but the second officer blocked him without effort. The social worker, Ms. Miller, knelt beside Daniel, who had wandered downstairs clutching a stuffed animal. She spoke softly, asking simple questions. He answered in a small, fragile voice. Aunt Laura makes me take the white pills when Mom's gone. They make my head fuzzy. Miller's face hardened. She stood up. We're transporting the minor for immediate medical evaluation. The University Medical Center has a bed ready. You can't take him. Laura screamed. Ramirez began reading her rights. My father tried to argue jurisdiction, his voice cracking with a desperation I had never seen. My mother collapsed into a dining chair, sobbing into her hands. I signed the temporary safety plan on the spot. Daniel hugged me tight, whispering into my shoulder. Are you coming with me? Every second, buddy. While the officers secured the scene, I pulled the printed deed from my office drawer, recorded in the county back in 2019, my name as the sole owner. I showed it to Ramirez. This property is solely mine. I am exercising my legal right to revoke residency privileges for my parents and my sister, effective immediately. My father's mouth opened and closed. For the first time in my life, he had absolutely nothing to say. Ramirez nodded. We can stand by while they collect essentials. They have 24 hours to vacate fully. After that, it's trespassing. Ms. Miller took Daniel by the hand. I grabbed his overnight bag and followed them to the car. Laura tried to run after us, but an officer stepped into her path. Her scream echoed down the street as we pulled away into the rain. At the hospital, they drew new blood and ran a fresh toxicology screen. Daniel was admitted to the pediatric wing for observation. By 9 that night, an on-call judge had signed the emergency protective order via video link. No contact between Daniel and the 3 adults for a minimum of 72 hours, with a review scheduled within 5 days. I sat in the vinyl chair beside his bed, holding his hand while he slept under warm blankets, free from the chemical fog for the first time in weeks. A nurse brought me a blanket of my own. I wrapped it around my shoulders and watched the heart monitor, its steady beep the only sound in the room. Back at the house, the officers oversaw the packing. My father carried out 2 suitcases in total silence. My mother followed with a laundry basket of clothes, her eyes swollen and red. Laura refused to pack at first, sitting on the basement sofa and screaming that everything was hers by right. Eventually, the officers explained she could leave on her own feet or in handcuffs. She left with 1 duffel bag and her purse, slamming the front door so hard the windows rattled. By midnight, the house was empty, save for the faint, lingering smell of garlic and the first real quiet I had heard in months. I changed every lock the next morning before Daniel came home. The emergency hearing took place 3 days later in courtroom 4 of the County Justice Center. I walked in with my attorney at my side, Daniel holding my hand with a grip that finally felt steady. The room smelled of old wood and floor wax. Laura sat at the respondent's table, flanked by a public defender. My parents sat directly behind her in the gallery, dressed as if they were attending a funeral. Judge Martha Vance entered the room, her silver hair pulled back, her expression unreadable. This is a review of emergency protective custody, the judge began. Counsel, you may proceed. Julia Vance stood beside me, her presence a sharp, professional contrast to the suffocating weight of the courtroom. Daniel held my hand with a grip that had finally stopped trembling. The room smelled of aged oak and lemon polish, a scent that felt too clean for the filth we were about to discuss. Laura sat at the respondent's table, flanked by a public defender who looked barely old enough to drive. My parents were positioned directly behind her in the gallery, dressed in somber black, as if they were attending a funeral for a relationship they had already murdered. Judge Martha Vance entered the room, her black robes billowing slightly, her silver hair pulled back into a severe, elegant knot. She didn't waste a second. This is a review of the Emergency Protective Custody Order. Ms. Vance, you may proceed. Julia stood. Your Honor, we are requesting the continuation of the emergency order, its conversion into a permanent 5-year restraining order with an automatic renewal clause, and significant civil damages for the intentional infliction of emotional distress and medical endangerment. She clicked a remote, and the large screen on the wall flickered to life. Laura's voice, cold and crystalline, filled the silent room. Once they're appointed conservators, the house is the biggest asset. We liquidate. The public defender stood to object, his voice cracking slightly as he challenged the chain of custody for the digital files. Judge Vance didn't even look up from her notes as she overruled him. I've reviewed the report from the County Digital Forensics Unit. The metadata is intact and the chain is verified. Sit down. Next came the midnight clip from the kitchen. My father's bourbon toast to new beginnings echoed off the high ceilings. My mother covered her face with her hands, but my father simply stared straight ahead, his jaw set in a hard, defiant line. Julia then called Dr. Grace Miller to the stand. Grace was clinical and devastating. She laid out the toxicology reports, the projected neurological risks, and stated flatly that this was the deliberate, repeated administration of a controlled substance to a minor without any medical justification. It is, by every legal and medical definition, child abuse, Grace concluded. The public defender tried to pivot, attempting to paint me as an absentee mother whose career took precedence over her child. Julia countered him instantly, producing my detailed travel logs, my childcare contracts, and Daniel's perfect school attendance record, at least until the poisoning had begun to take its toll. Laura took the stand last. She played the part of the victim, weeping and claiming the pills were merely herbal sleep aids, and that she only wanted to help a restless child. Judge Vance leaned forward, her eyes piercing. If they were simple aids, Ms. Bennett, why was there no label, no dosage instruction, and no prescription record? Laura had no answer. She simply sobbed into her hands. My parents, warned by the judge about the consequences of perjury, refused to testify. Their silence was the loudest thing in the room. Judge Vance returned after a 20-minute recess. The court finds clear and convincing evidence of immediate, calculated danger to the child's physical and emotional welfare. The emergency order is hereby converted to a permanent protective order. Laura Bennett, Arthur Bennett, and Martha Bennett are prohibited from any contact with Daniel Bennett for a period of 5 years, renewable upon a showing of continued risk. She didn't stop there. A civil judgment is entered against Laura Bennett in the amount of $48,000 for medical expenses, therapy, and pain and suffering. The state's criminal investigation will proceed separately. The gavel hit the bench with a final, echoing crack. Laura collapsed forward, her forehead hitting the table. My mother reached out toward her, then pulled her hand back and sat in frozen silence. My father continued to stare at the floor, his face a mask of bitter ruin. We walked out into the hallway. Daniel hugged my leg, looking up at me with clear, bright eyes. Are we safe now, Mom? I knelt down, looking him directly in the eye, and for the first time in months, I felt like I wasn't lying. Completely safe, Daniel. 1 week later, the daycare center where Laura had worked for 6 years received the official substantiation letter from Social Services. State law required her immediate termination. Her personnel file was flagged permanently, no licensed childcare facility in the state would ever hire her again. I filed the civil judgment that same afternoon. The collection process began 30 days later. By October, the house felt different. Soft autumn sunlight poured through the new skylight I'd had installed in the upstairs hall, the one Daniel had picked out himself. He turned 10 last month. There were 10 candles on a chocolate cake, and he blew them all out in a single, confident breath. His cheeks were pink, his eyes were sharp, and the chemical fog that had shadowed his childhood was finally gone. The neighborhood looks the same from the street, but the interior of my life has been rebuilt. Fresh paint in blues and greens, a new security system, and a doorbell camera that ensures I know exactly who is on my porch. The trust one established for Daniel is now irrevocable until he reaches adulthood. Every cent of the equity from his father's life insurance sits safely inside it, managed by a professional fiduciary I chose myself. Northwest relative, and no court can touch it without a judge's specific order and my signature. Laura lives in a 400-square-foot studio apartment on the edge of the city. It's the kind of place where the walls are thin, and the air tastes like exhaust. The $48,000 judgment hangs over her like a permanent storm. Wage garnishment started 3 months ago, 15% of every paycheck vanished before she even saw it. With her career in ruins, she works nights stocking shelves at a 24-hour grocery store, wearing a name tag that just says L because her full name reminds too many people of the local news articles. My parents rent a 1-bedroom unit in a complex that accepts government vouchers. My father had to sell his truck to cover the first few months of rent and his legal fees. My mother's social circles have evaporated. I heard they keep the thermostat at 60 degrees to save on utilities. They never ask about Daniel. I never offer updates. On Sundays, I often drive Daniel up into the mountains. We hike the trails near the glacial lakes, even when the air turns biting and cold. We skip stones across the water and eat hearty bowls of chili at a small diner in the village. He talks non-stop now, about his soccer team, his science projects, and the elaborate Lego city he's building in the basement. His 4th-grade teacher sent home a note last week. Daniel has shown remarkable improvement in focus and confidence. He is a joy to have in class. I kept that note on the fridge, right next to his latest A+ spelling test. People sometimes ask if I miss them, my own parents, my only sister. The answer is simple: I miss the idea of them. I miss the version of them that existed before greed and resentment turned them into monsters. But the people who sat in my kitchen plotting to drug my child for a payout. Those people were never family. Blood doesn't buy loyalty, and it certainly doesn't excuse a betrayal this deep. If you ever feel that knot in your stomach, that quiet voice telling you something in your own home is wrong, listen to it. Document everything. Protect your children first and ask questions later. The people closest to you are often the ones capable of the deepest cuts, and the law can't restore a childhood that's already been stolen. Daniel and I are building something new now. Our own rules, our own laughter, our own home. Some nights he still wanders into my room after a bad dream, and I hold him until his breathing evens out. I lie there staring at the ceiling, and remind myself that we made it through the worst of it. The rest is just living. Daniel talks incessantly now, about his classes, his soccer tryouts, and the intricate Lego spaceship he's currently designing in the den. His 4th-grade teacher sent home a handwritten note last week, mentioning his remarkable improvement in both focus and self-confidence. I keep that note pinned to the refrigerator, right next to his latest spelling test, an A+ that feels like a quiet triumph over the fog they tried to trap him in. People sometimes ask if I miss them, my parents, my only sister. The answer is simple. I miss the memory of who I thought they were. I miss the version of them that existed before greed turned them into strangers. But the people who sat in my kitchen plotting to sedate my child for a payout. Those people were never family. Blood doesn't buy loyalty, and it certainly doesn't excuse a betrayal this profound. If you are reading this and you feel that persistent, cold knot in your stomach because something in your own home doesn't feel right, listen to it. Document everything. Protect your children first and ask the difficult questions later. The people closest to you are often the ones capable of the deepest wounds, and the law can never truly restore a childhood that has already been stolen. Daniel and I are carving out a new normal, just the two of us. Our own rules, our own laughter, our own sanctuary. Some nights he still seeks out my room after a nightmare, and I hold him until his breathing levels out into a steady, healthy rhythm. In those quiet hours, I stare at the ceiling and remind myself that we have made it through the worst of the storm. The rest is just living.